You see this tent behind me? I think this is one of the best gear finds I've had in quite a long time. Over the last couple of years, I have definitely skewed towards the ultralight, ultra expensive gear. A number of people have called me out on YouTube to say, hey, what about the rest of us? So, earlier this year, I took a deep dive into Amazon to find some great gear. This tent behind me is one of the best finds that I've had in a long time. This tent behind me here is the Featherstone Granite 2-person tent. This cost me a measly $109. I have seen very similar tents costing well over $400 that this performs equally as well as. And we'll get into that a little bit later in the video. I first found this tent and I took it out on a little section of the Colorado Trail and got a couple of nights in it. And I was so impressed with it that when I did a recent backpacking trip in Washington with Miranda Goes Outside and Rainer, I decided, you know what? It's time to take this budget tent on a true beatdown of a real backpacking trip, 5 days through the Alpine Lakes wilderness to see how it would really hold up. The immediate takeaway on why I love this tent is how spacious it is. This has a massive amount of headroom, and it's not just that it's tall enough for me to actually sit up, but that it's wide enough from side to side for 2 people to truly use this tent. So this is about a 50-inch, I believe it's a 51 inches wide. So what that means is you can actually fit 2 25-inch wide mattresses, which for me is kind of a must now. I have changed my backpacking ways and I've gotten away from the 20-inch wide mattresses. So if I'm backpacking, I'm probably using a 25-inch wide mattress. And if I need to share that, that means I need enough room for 2 of the good mattresses that mean good sleep. A lot of times 2-person backpacking tents are really 1-person tents with a little bit of extra room for your gear, where I feel like this is actually a real meaningful 2-person backpacking tent. If you might be able to tell, there's a few other tents that are in the background that I've set up that I do want to showcase later in the video, because I think it's pointing out some of its competition in the budget, as well as a very similar tent that this is literally a quarter of the price of. It even has some extra storage, and look at this big gear loft that's up here. Now this is the perfect place to put your headlamp or to store some headphones or to just store anything that bits and bobs that might get lost in your tent throughout the night that you want to keep track of. Gloves, beanies, anything like that. As you can see, it also just has this huge amount of mesh. And the reason why I like that is because when it's warm, I want that airflow. I want that air to literally be able to pass through here. It's really nice when the weather is pleasant and mild and you're just trying to get yourself protection from bugs to just have it exactly like this. No rain fly up, and you can just see through. At night you can stargaze. And in fact, when I was in Washington, I did that for as many nights as I could that the weather would allow. One of the things that makes this tent stand out to me is the pole structure. I can set this up any which way and I'm not doing it wrong, which makes setup really, really simple. Sometimes you have to get the poles exactly right and there's like a right and a wrong way to do it. Not with this tent, which is really, really nice. And the other thing that you'll see is that this big brow pole really extends the headroom and the vertical space. That means that these walls are almost pure vertical. So that really maximizes the interior volume and space that I have. One other thing that I've noticed is that these zippers are actually surprisingly clean. They just work really well. And I haven't had problems with catching or with gunking up zippers. It's just been a really pleasant tent to use. At $109, this is like a tent that definitely outperforms its price point by a lot. I'm gonna leave that tent behind real quick and I'm gonna show you one other budget tent that I've been using that I picked up in my Amazon searches. This is the Nature Hike Cloud Up 2-person backpacking tent. And this is very similarly priced. This is a $120 tent, at least at the time that I purchased it. I believe that this tent is vastly inferior in pretty much every way. The Featherstone has 2 doors, 2 vestibules of the rainfly, and that just makes it so much more useful in real-time backpacking. Having this door on the front is really not ideal for me for a couple of reasons. One, you literally have to get very low to get inside this tent. And if you are actually backpacking with 2 people, you're always like in each other's space. If you're backpacking with another person and you have a tent like this, getting in and out, you're practically crawling over the person. And if you're not intimate partners with that person, it's not gonna be a very fun experience. Probably pretty obvious one of the downsides to this tent, and that is the interior headroom. I'm literally touching both sides of the tent with my shoulders. Yes, I have enough room to sit up, but if I'm backpacking in this tent with another person, you have to decide who gets to sit up and who has to lay down at any given time, which is really just not very fun. Having camped and backpacked in tents like this, these are especially poor performers in inclement weather. If you ever get socked in and it's raining and you have to climb in and out of this front door, you are very likely to drag in mud and rain and just have it not be very nice. And this door is very small and low and you're kind of army crawling in and out. And honestly, for me, that's a deal breaker. When I first opened this up, I was just like, nope, I'm not interested. I don't like this tent. This might seem on the surface very similar with the pole structure as the Featherstone. Yes, it has these two Ys, one on the front and one on the back, but a subtle difference is this one is much bigger. This is the side where the door is. This is the much smaller footbox of the tent. Now, the first time I set this up, I didn't realize that they were different, and I set it up completely backwards and it didn't even work. It's very easy to mistake which side goes which way. Something else that I'm not a fan of is just the clips themselves. Bit of a learning curve to actually figure out which way to twist them. And while it's not that big of a deal, when you have clips that are effortless and then you go to these, to me, it was just like enough of a frustration to be like, nope, I don't want my tent to do that. One more reason why the Featherstone really stands out to me as such a great tent is because of how eerily similar it is to a tent that's literally 5 times the price. Now, I do actually really love Nemo. They make some amazing gear. They make some of my favorite tents and sleeping bags on the market. And this is the Nemo Dagger Osmo 2-person backpacking tent. This literally costs $529 and it weighs identical. This is a 4-pound, 2-ounce tent. The Featherstone is a 4-pound, 2-ounce tent. So what do you get with the Osmo? A tent that I think is actually still a good tent, but at the price, why would you spend 5 times as much? Inside the tent, it's relatively similar, but I actually prefer the Featherstone because of the amount of mesh that's on it. This subtle difference between this fabric right here and this fabric right here, this allows more airflow to pass through, as well as more visibility. I like to be able to see out. Now, there are some people who might prefer more privacy, and if you don't have the rain fly up, this will provide a little bit of extra privacy, if you will, that people looking sideways into your tent won't see you laying there sleeping. And I suppose that could be a selling point one way or the other, depending on what you want. But for me, I like the increased little bit of airflow and the increased visibility of the Featherstone. This has some small features that I think are better, such as this little mesh pocket that provides an ambient glow if you stick your headlamp in there. The Featherstone has this storage space and this one does not. And that one's just complimentary. And if you feel like taking it out, you can. If you want to shed that 2 ounces that probably is, you can do that. So I was just backpacking in the Alpine Lakes wilderness with this exact tent. Something else that made a huge difference for me was element. Backpacking in Washington was surprising. I was sweating a ton. And I don't know if I would have enjoyed myself as much as I did if I didn't have element to help me replenish my electrolytes that I was losing massively. Now, I've used most of the electrolyte mixes out there, and to some moderate success, they've been fine. I don't actually feel better. I don't notice a difference. It just tastes like a sugary drink, which, sure, that's fine. But what I love about Element is that it isn't any of the BS. It's none of the junk. It's none of the stuff you don't need. It's exactly what you do need. And for me, that's salt. And for most people, that's salt. I drink these even in regular life. I don't have to be out hiking and backpacking and doing crazy stuff and sweating my booty off. It's even great when I'm just working in my backyard or after a night out with friends. Honestly, these are great, and I think that you will genuinely like them. So if you want to check them out, which I highly recommend you do, please check out the link below at drinkelement.com/erichanson, drinkelement.com/erichanson, and you can get a free sample pack with any purchase. That's 8 of some of their most popular flavors given to you for free with any purchase. It's a great deal, and everybody that I know that tries them really, really loves them. So please check them out at the link below and enjoy. Sometimes with budget tents, you get what you pay for, and the Rainfly is really where you see that budget price come into play. Sometimes the rainflies are just bad, poorly designed, very heavy, not very functional, very stiff, all the things that you don't want in a rainfly. However, the Featherstone tent, again, surprises me with the quality of its rainfly. The Featherstone rainfly is actually quite a bit superior to a lot of the other budget backpacking tents that I've tried and used. This is a 20 denier sil nylon 2000 millimeter hydrostatic rainfly. 20 denier is a good standard lightweight material that you see very commonly in much higher end backpacking gear. And it has a waterproof rating that is, I think, pretty decent and adequate. And a lot of times with the cheap tents, you're gonna see actually polyester instead of sil nylon. So just getting this is gonna save me about 1 pound to 1.5 pounds in the rainfly alone. In fact, my first iteration of doing the Amazon Gear Video Challenge, I picked up the hike and bike tent, and it was fine. It was a very roomy, spacious tent, $120, good budget price, but it was 5.5 pounds. And the main culprit for why it was so heavy was the rainfly. And it was this polyester material and just wasn't that nice. It was very stiff. It kind of flapped awkwardly in the wind, made a lot of noise. And I can't recommend that tent for real backpacking. It's fine for car camping, but this one is actually suitable for real backpacking. There's also some nice features built into this rainfly, such as double ventilation. You've got the ability to guy it out nicely. It's got these extra guy points. You have the ability to vent it out at the head and the foot end of the tent, which so far I found to be very, very nice. Right down here is also something I really like. This little buckle is very simple to use. Very easy, very clean, easy to cinch up and tighten. I like that a lot. Going back to the Nemo Dagger for a second, you can really see the rainfly here probably is a little bit of a superior design. You actually have 2 points where the rainfly guys out, which means you have a more ample vestibule space, a little bit more useful in case of real inclement weather. You can store gear side to side while still getting in and out of both sides of the tent very nicely. Even though I don't necessarily know if it justifies being 5 times the price, that is something that I think does stand out from this tent to the Featherstone. Going back to the nature hike for a second, there's a few reasons why I think this rainfly and this tent overall is just not gonna be as nice. The rainfly only has this one vent and it's on the back and it's pretty low. It's going to be very ineffective in my opinion. Just looking at the basics of this design, if your ventilation is really low, most of that moisture is gonna get trapped up in the top anyway, and it's just not gonna get out of the tent. And it only has one. One more ding is that the vestibule space on this tent is tiny. This is all you get, and this is also your main entrance. So if you clog this up with gear storage, let's say it's raining or something like that, and you have 2 people, you can't bring it in the tent because there's not enough room. This is the only place you can do it, and you're gonna be crawling over that gear to get in and out of your tent. And that's just not gonna be very nice. The only upside to the Nature Hike Cloud Up 2-person tent is the weight. There is a small savings in weight at this being just under 4 pounds. It's like 3 pounds, 13 ounces, I think, which is about 5 ounces lighter than the Featherstone. But to me, for the actual functionality of the tent, that is not a significant enough win for me to say that this tent beats the Featherstone tent. And this is also a tiny bit more expensive. Last I looked, it was $130. I picked it up for $120 at the time. Prices fluctuate all the time on Amazon. $10 here, $30 here. While this is a suitable backpacking tent, it really is only gonna work if you're going by yourself. And if you're going by yourself, then maybe this is the better tent than the Featherstone because you do save 5 ounces. But to me, I would just much prefer the Featherstone. Let's talk about durability. This tent I've used for 7 nights of actual backpacking, and it has shown no signs of real wear and tear, damage, abrasions, anything like that, anything that would cause me some significant concerns. Now, 7 nights is not a dramatic amount of time, but for some people, that might be what they spend in a tent in a whole year, or maybe even 2 years. The purpose of a good tent like this is really to allow more people to get outside without the budget inhibiting them from getting out. And yeah, if you can afford a $500 tent, then yeah, it's probably a little bit better than this $100 tent, but not dramatically so. I think this is a great backpacking tent for people who are probably only gonna go backpacking for a few times a year. And honestly, I think that this is just a great tent, even if you are a regular backpacker. Now, while I haven't been in this tent in dramatically inclement weather, when I was backpacking in the Alpine Lakes Wilderness, one of the nights we had consistent winds around 20 miles an hour with gusts over 30 miles an hour. And this tent held up great. There wasn't any structural issues, there wasn't flapping. It just was a very well-performing tent. Now, I've had quite a few commenters say that they've used this tent and that they love this tent. They've used it for years. I am really encouraged because the quality actually feels really nice. Sometimes when you get these tents and you get these products, you can just feel that like, oh, this is super cheap. Well, actually, this is one that I think really punches above its weight class. I don't know how it is actually as good as it is. What about warranties? Okay, so Nemo Tent has a great warranty where if any problem happens, then yeah, you can just send it in. Nemo will fix it, replace it, recycle it back into their long ongoing program for reselling new gear, which is great and cool. Well, amazingly, Featherstone also offers a warranty, and you don't even have to ship it back to China or something like that. It's actually in California. While I haven't experienced what it's like to work with them for customer service and repairs, you actually are dealing with somebody in the US as opposed to dealing with shipping overseas or anything like that. So I feel encouraged that the actual warranty and repairs might be reasonable to navigate with the Featherstone tent. So let's boil it down to who this tent is for. At 4 pounds, this is not going to be an ultralighter's dream. If you are backpacking for like 10 miles or less per day, then this is probably a good, suitable backpacking tent. And if you're only going to be going out for a handful of trips every year, this is a great option. And honestly, at $100, I think this is a better tent than some of the tents I've used at double and even triple the price. So I think that real backpackers can truly use this tent. But if you are on the budget end of the spectrum and maybe you don't have a ton of experience, this is a fantastic tent that I think is really going to be a great solution for a lot of backpackers and campers out there. And what's cool for me is that I get to keep learning, keep diving into new gear, and keep learning and exploring and finding these gems like the Featherstone Granite tent. If you haven't subscribed already to my channel, it makes a huge difference to me. It's an easy way to support a creator or a channel that you enjoy. So if you haven't already subscribed, please hit that subscribe button. And thank you so much for watching. If you have any additional questions, you gotta hit me up because I will try my best to answer as many as I can. All right, thanks so much for watching. I'm Eric Hanson. I'll see you later.